Hello, and glad to be back. And as the rather high-flying introduction promises, I'm going to say a few words on how you can actually implement a security server using a cloud-based service and do your whole security server implementation up in the air. But before we go there, I think a few words on what I'm going to cover today, and then a little bit of background on why we did all this. So the things I'm going to cover in this second presentation of mine is what were the business needs that started us doing all this work. Then some kind of an overview on what the security sidecar actually is. I'm going to cover its key use cases, the platforms that we support at the moment, and again, as in my previous session, the tailorability for your own uses and for your own country implementations and for your own national environments. I'm also going to cover in a few words on how we did it together with NIS and our software partner Go4. And before wrapping up, I'm also going to say a few words on the maintenance model and the future of the sidecar. The background and the business need for the sidecar that we set out to solve were that, again, we had concrete customer problems and concrete customer use cases that formed the basis of all of this work. We were getting feedback, and we were actually seeing it in our own studies that the expense and the overall complexity of setting up a security server, the physical server implementation, all of that was actually forming a barrier of entry, especially in some of our municipal sector parts. They simply didn't have the means or the wherewithal. Secondly, we were also getting feedback that the high operating costs of a traditional security server were actually acting as a deterrent. So a lot of the organizations were evaluating the data exchange layer, but were becoming somewhat wary on the overall operating expense. And we were, as I said, we were also seeing that especially smaller organizations who would have had a benefit on using the data exchange layer simply didn't have the technical skills, the people, the knowledge, the overall wherewithal on implementing a security server. And at the same time, we were also seeing that as an overall development, an increasing number of the IT implementations were actually being done in the cloud instead of the on-premises environments. And all of that actually got us thinking that maybe we need to do some things slightly differently. And the solution that we set out for doing is what we call the security server sidecar. So basically, it is the security server software put in a Docker container, and that container can function as both a consumer and a provider security server. It's all nicely wrapped up there in a nice clean Docker container. At the same time, the security server sidecar, it does actually contain the full functionality of the security server. There is a slide coming up on the various images and what the images contain and what functionalities they will support, but a bit more about that a little bit later down the road. Our initial idea for the security server sidecar was actually supporting the smaller scale municipal actors with little needs for the data exchange layer, primarily working as consumers of information, needing a fairly limited set amount of services that are available through the data exchange layer. And therefore, we actually started from the overall design premise and principle of making something nice, clean, easy to set up, something really lightweight. But as the project went onwards, we actually understood and got an increasing realization that while the initial use case for having something simple, something small, something light is really valid, at the same time we also need to look at the higher end. So we also started increasingly designing these really extensive cloud-based implementations there, making sure that the security server can also work under heavier loads. And the end result was actually a Docker container, and that can be installed aside of the client service as a small, simple, nice, easy implementation, or it can be cloud-based using the full capabilities of for example, the Kubernetes capabilities for capacity, redundancy, and the overall scalability. The benefits that the security server in a Docker container gives you or gives the users of the data exchange layer and the overall wider X-Road community are that it basically lets everyone select a security server solution that really suits them and their needs and organizational specificalities in the best possible way. So on one hand, the Sidecar removes the need for you to have investment in a physical server or in a physical server farm. So you can put all of this in a cloud and do it as a cloud-based implementation. At the same time, it does not really rule out the hardware security server implementation. So you can either have a mixed environment, or you can actually have the Docker container running on a physical server if that is the architectural solution and the implementation that you end up with. So basically, any current service scenario is supported, but at the same time, you can take full use of the cloud. And as I slightly mentioned already, the security server Sidecar can scale up from something really small, really simple, to a heavy use multi-tenancy use cases. As the project went on, we decided that we will design the security server Sidecar to be cloud native. So in that sense, it actually makes it possible for you to use the full capabilities of common cloud technologies. At the moment, together with NIS, we provide a reference implementation for the AWS cloud services. We also support the AWS auto-scaling capabilities. That was one of the last things we added in the security server Sidecar just before we moved the project over to maintenance phase. There's also options for implementing the security server database. It can either be in the same container or using the capabilities again offered by the cloud environment. Slight problem there with the slide. As I've mentioned a couple of times, the Sidecar basically resides in a standard Docker container. So this is a very common implementation technology, very widely known in the development community. You can implement the Sidecar either on the same Linux physical device as you would be implementing your basic information system, or you can put it somewhere else. The key idea there is, and the initial design principle was that in some scenarios, the Sidecar could actually start and shut itself down together with the client system that it's serving. We also support multi-tenancy as part of the security server Sidecar, and currently we have implemented it up to X-Road version 6.26. The images that currently are available, there are two kinds of images. Basically, there are images tailored for the Finnish data exchange layer, as you see in the table below. And then there are images for the X-Road default configuration. So that's two kinds of images in one way. But at the same time, there are two kinds of images in the other way. So we offer images that are nicknamed as Sidecar Slim. And then there are images as security server Sidecar. The key difference there is that the Sidecar Slim doesn't offer all the features and functionalities that you need for a full security server, but it basically is tailored for the minimum use of the data exchange layer. The key difference there being that the base image, the security server sidecar, includes the packages for environmental monitoring, operational monitoring, and message logging. The supported features as per the sidecar image. The key idea there being that the sidecar slim for the basic implementation. It doesn't contain the capabilities for message logging, environmental monitoring, and operational monitoring. And since it doesn't have the message logging capabilities enabled, it also means that you don't have to configure the timestamp service for the Sidecar Slim, at least in Finland, since there is a dependency for that. What happens in other countries is again a different case. A few words on the supported platforms, as as was defined as the last stages in the project. We only support Docker on Linux for production environments. For testing use cases, you can actually use the Docker on other platforms such as the Mac OS or Windows, but for production, we are only comfortable with the Linux implementations of Docker. A few words on the development model. The toolkit, as done, has been a joint development between the Finnish Digital Agency, the Nordic Institute, and Go4. We basically, this was a pioneering effort in the sense that we sort of like divided the work between us in a way that the DVV was responsible for the overall project charter, for funding the project, providing the customer need and priority, and communicating also with the stakeholders and potential customers within the data exchange layer community. And for the time being, we will also be responsible for making sure that the security server sidecar is being maintained. The Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions provided us the development environment, also the development model, the subject matter expertise for making sure that we get all the bits and pieces correct. We're able to cross all the T's and put all the dots in the I's. And knowing that there will be a long future for the sidecar, the Nordic Institute also provides us the distribution via their GitHub account. Go4, our mutual software partner, provided the day-to-day project management. Go4 also provided the development team and also the releasing activities. And at least we found this model a fairly nice and smooth functioning one. A few words on the sidecar future, which I assume will interest all of you in more than one ways. So the situation today is that the Finnish Digital Agency has agreed on the maintenance responsibility for the sidecar for the time being. Basically, it means that at the moment, we provide support for critical bug fixes, security patches, and so on. Basically offering basic maintenance. If there is a pull request against the sidecar images, unfortunately, we will then have to evaluate them with a fairly high threshold. As I mentioned a few times in the presentation already, the images that are available at the moment are the generic X-Road images and the Finnish specific country adaptations for the Finnish data exchange layer. Any other country-specific adaptations, unfortunately, we can't really offer any kind of help and support there. Adaptations for other cloud-based services, we can't really help you there with that, at least at the moment. Going forward, we are already in discussions together with NIS for handing over the security server sidecar for future development as part of the X-Road 7 asset. This handover will happen already during this year so that NIS can then release an updated version of the security server Sidecar as part of the X-Road 7 asset. At the same time, what's still being discussed and what is still slightly open, but I see this as a very likely future outcome, is that the Finnish Digital Agency will be responsible for the long-term maintenance for the current X-Road 6.x based images. But as I said, this is slightly in the air at the moment, but the most likely way forward. In case I happened to get you interested and you want to know more about the security server Sidecar, there is a rather nice introduction in English on our Suomi.fi service management. The link is there. It actually gives you a nice overview on the security server Sidecar, its capabilities, and where to find the images. And if you want to jump straight into the Sidecar documentation, the link to the NIS GitHub is below there, and also the download image for getting the security server Sidecar images is there for your future reference. And I think this is the bulk of my presentation. In case there are any questions, this would be the time for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Anssi. And indeed, this is the moment of the questions, and we do have questions. We have a couple of questions, yes, from the public, and already one of them would be, what would be the main limitations of using SS Sidecar versus the standalone SS installation?
Oh, that's a good one, and unfortunately, I don't think I can actually give you an all-encompassing answer at the moment. But if you're able to record the question for later use, I will then provide a more kind of like a full answer later down the road, if that's okay.
Okay, I think we can. Yes, I think we can. Mm-hmm. We have a couple of other questions for you, indeed. One is like, do you take into account the possibility for other countries to implement the solution when you make decisions for that regard the development of the solution itself?
Yes, actually we do, and that is the reason why we're handing the security server Sidecar over to NIS for development as part of the X-Road 7 asset. As I said, we only consider the Finnish capabilities at the moment, but at the same time, we've already designed the security server Sidecar in a way that it has all the basic enablers in place for easy implementation by, for example, NIS, for adding the country-specific adaptations later down the road. So yes, we did think about that already in advance.
Okay, perfect. And we have actually one last question for you, and for this session of the X-Road community event, which somehow introduces already even like the next speaker, because we're at least I'm mentioning a company that is connected to where the next speaker is from, and the question goes as follows. So the presentation seemed to talk about almost only Amazon cloud services. So can the security server Sidecar be implemented also on other cloud platforms, such as, for example, Google Cloud or Azure?
That's a very good question indeed. So as I said, we provide a reference implementation on the Amazon cloud services. It was simply made as a design convenience, and also for the reason that we had to limit the project delivery and the project capabilities somewhat. Overall, if we look at it from a kind of like a very wide technological viewpoint, there is no barriers, no limitations on implementing the security server Sidecar on other cloud services, such as you mentioned, the Azure or the Google Cloud. However, the current implementation does rely somewhat on the Amazon capabilities on, for example, for security, hardening, capacity, redundancy, For example, the auto scaling is one of those things. So if you want to implement the security server sidecar on say, for example, Google Cloud, you would have to think about all of those questions separately in context and in connection with with that cloud service. But technically, at least to my understanding, there isn't anything that would be really preventing you from doing that.
Perfect. Anssi, thanks a lot for joining us today for 2 sessions, the first one and also this one again.